Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
All right, here we go, Josh. It's been a while, but
yes,
we're back.
It's life, you know. I've been to Las Vegas. You've been to Las Vegas. You know,
it's a whole nother conversation.
But that was fun stuff. Today we're going to talk about the new Alex Garland movie, Civil War. Which, going into it and seeing the trailer, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be very incendiary based on it being an election year and all that stuff. But almost immediately, once you get into the movie, you find out that it's a movie about journalists and a movie about war journalism and about war and the role of journalists in war specifically. So that made it a little bit easier for me to ramp into, I think. So because I would much rather the discussion about the movie be about the filmmaking and about the subject matter specifically of the movie versus all the extraneous stuff around that. So is that kind of the feeling that you got?
Yeah, I'm on the exact same page. I don't mind engaging in a conversation based on this movie from what's going on in the outside world, if you will. I don't mind engaging. And as a matter of fact, I was I was wondering if this movie would be some form of, hey, let's be careful because look, what's happening in this film could happen. And she says that in the movie. She says that, Kirsten Dunst says that in the movie. And I'm skipping ahead, but she says, every time I sent a photograph home, I was hoping this was a warning that it never happened again. But here we are. So I was thinking exactly the same thing you were thinking, that it was going to be some kind of spark, but it's not. It's a character-based film. It's about the situations the characters put themselves into or are put into based on this dystopian, not post-apocalyptic, middle-apocalyptic world that they're living in, this Civil War world. So yeah, I felt the same way. And I was glad that I learned more about the humans than I did about the insurrection or the third term of the president or why he did what. That's handled extremely well. The details of how things happen are put out throughout the film, and you learn a little as you go along, but you're still a little confused at the end about exactly what happened, which I think is on purpose.
Well, and I think that for me, it was like, there's going to be the initial, how did we get here type of a thing? Like, How are they in this situation? Because you're right, it's not post-apocalyptic. And I like that mid-apocalyptic, really. But the crazy part is that like civil wars are happening all over, have happened all over, the world since our Civil War in the 1800s. So it's not like, obviously it's never happened in the United States, but it hasn't happened in the United States, but it's happened other places. And that was, I think, her thing, where she said when she was sending home pictures of war-torn areas, whether it be civil wars or whether it be incursions of one country into another, that was her, she was like saying, like, look at what's going on in these areas. And she wants, to bring those images back to people to in the United States to try to help analyze like what's going on and prevent something like that from happening in the United States. But obviously in this particular world that didn't happen. I think that's the other thing, is that we see people living in this world, in this Civil War world, and there's a couple of little vignette scenes where people are dealing with that in different ways, whether it's being all encompassed by the situation, whether it's being engaging with it, whether it being protests or being like pushing back against the government and the government's dealing with those things. We see that at the beginning in the New York scenes, or whether that's completely disengaging and shoring up the boundaries around a small town, for example, that
walking your dog down the street, she's an elderly lady who is very dolled up.
Oh, the dog walking lady?
Yeah, the dog. And it struck me how contradictive it was to everything in the film. And I don't mean any disrespect by saying dolled up. She was dressed up, as if she was, presenting.
She had the time and the mental capability of dressing up, and that
it was still an important factor of life that she needed to walk her very fluffy poodle down the street, or whatever kind of dog it was. But it was, wow, okay, that's interesting. This is a form of denial, because they tap into that a couple of times in the film about how, my parents are back in wherever.
Missouri.
I thought it was Missouri. And they're just acting like this isn't happening. And then Kirsten Dunst says the same thing later on, same thing, blah, blah, blah. And this is a new way of handling denial. And that scene's in the trailer, or one of the trailers, so I don't feel as bad about talking about it as if it's a spoiler, because it is a very interestingly shot film, because it's shot low when Kirsten Dunst comes out of the store. And the other actor, and I can't remember his name, I love him. I think
Stephen Henderson?
Yeah, I think about him from Fences, Bono.
Yeah.
From Fences. That's how I think about him. Although
Yeah,
he's also
well,
he's in everything.
Alex Garland has used him a bunch too.
Yeah.
So
it makes sense when you have that solid of a performer. That makes sense. But he was like, and immediately when the camera kind of comes in on her, it's from her waist up, and then you don't really see him, and then all of a sudden the camera comes up, but then the camera just stops. It would be a natural progression for the camera to keep going to see his face, but it stops. And then he very subtly says, pretty much gives her the hint that, hey, this is not what it seems. Look up, be quiet about it.
This town is being protected by a group of people and they will not allow anything to get out of line.
Right. And what's fascinating
concerned
about that scene for me is that that's not the shock value. That some of the war-torn tropes that are in the film, refugees walking down the streets, battle-torn cities, we've seen before. But what Alex Garland does is that his subtlety about bringing things in, instead of making a comment about, oh, they're on the roof and this is a dangerous place and this is how they control the thing, they don't go into it. He just simply says, we would have gotten bored here anyway. And then they continue on. And it's a very subtle way to say, hey, no, this is what these characters are here to do. And also, this is not the subject of this film per se, that these two characters would not be able to fit into this hometown, small town world, not because of the rifles on the roof, but because this is not the life they've chosen. This is not the life that calls to them.
There's no conflict. Yeah. And because that's there is something that draws them into, and we get to, through the Kaylee Spaney character, Jesse, we get to see that person kind of coming into their own. Yeah. And in that environment, and determining, she had an inkling of wanting to be a war photographer, wanting to be a photographer first as a profession, and wanting to be a war photographer second as a specific, specialty in her profession. And that is a very specific thing. And so there's certain things that she doesn't know she's going to run into. And that's our journey through the film. And it's also the opposite journey in the Kirsten Dunst character, Lee, is the backing away from that. And I really noticed that. I mean, we can start to, I don't know if this is spoilers or not, but the biggest thing that I wanted to bring up at the beginning was that, number one, this is not necessarily a political movie. It's not. It is a movie about the purpose of journalists in society and in our world, and the need for journalists in our world. So that was my biggest thing. So if you are not going to watch this movie, or if you didn't want to watch this movie because you thought it would be too politicized, I don't think it is. I think it's definitely a war movie, and it's definitely a war movie from a very specific point of view. So I think I'm ready to get into spoilers.
The least fascinating thing for me was that it was set in America.
Yeah.
That, like, your point about there's civil war going on all over the world is a point. Now, should it be more shocking that it's happening in America? On some level, yes. But I think the way Alex Garland handles those shots of what it looks like, it are near perfect. That was the hardest trick to pull off.
All that being said, the Kirsten Dunst character, we see her pull back from, like, her desire and her need to codify these images and to bring those images to the public, and to be the eyes of the public in these war-torn areas and in these specific situations. It gets reeled back to the point where she stops taking pictures less than halfway into the movie. And I didn't notice that. I did just watch it a second time because it's been a couple weeks since I saw it the first time. And I really keyed in on that the second time I watched it, is that she doesn't take, like, the last pictures that she really takes are in the high-rise battle between the Western forces and then the U.S. government, I guess. And that's when kind of the Jesse character starts to engage in the situation, and then they're both kind of like back and forth taking pictures. That's the other thing that I want to bring up, is that the way that they differentiate between Lee's pictures and Jesse's pictures is that Lee is using a color digital camera and Jesse's using that black and white film camera. And I do like how they kind of like stop the film and they give you that static shot with no sound, whenever they do take their pictures. And then it helps you to understand that, there's a real thing going on, but then also these images that they're taking are going to be preserved forever in this moment, and they're going to be a representation of the moment and what they did, what it looked like before that exact moment happened and what it looked like after that exact moment happened. That was kind of a cool way of doing that, a filmic way of doing that, because inherently pictures are not filmic. Right. Ken Burns does his thing where he zooms in and pans left and right and stuff, but ultimately images, still images are not necessarily filmic, but Alex Garland figured out a way to do it. So I thought that.
And also, there's a ton of parallels between Jesse's rise and Lee's not fall, but disconnection. You can see there are a bunch of parallels.
It's like her resignation. She's kind of just like slowing and stopping.
Yeah. As she's deflating, you can see Jesse inflating. Yeah. And it's and all the way to the very end of the film, in which I was like, oh, I should have saw that coming.
I know. They really do like lay the tracks for what's going on.
Really, like it's like smack you on the back of the head, Captain Obvious, because it's coming. But when it does, it's like, oh, okay. And strangely enough, I was more disappointed, and we'll get there, about not figuring that out than I was about what was happening to the characters, because of course that's what happens. Of course that's when Kirsten Dunst says to her, "What do you think?" When she asks her about taking
would you
the
take
picture.
my picture?
Yeah. What do you think? The way she handles that. And I know you want to proceed on in a different direction, but I'm going to stop for just a second and say Kirsten Dunst. My goodness, she's great in this. And apparently she didn't work for 2 years after she made that film, which is weird because I can't figure out how
She made which film?
Power of the Dog.
Power of the Dog. Yeah. That was the last thing that we've talked about her in, yeah.
Right. And apparently she hasn't worked. I just hope that this
she just had a kid, because I was listening to her and Jesse Plemons just had another child, I guess, because she was talking about some of the movies that they watched before they shot before they shot this film, and some of the stuff was like, it was war journalism type stuff, and she couldn't handle watching it because there were small children involved, and she was like emotionally not able to watch it. She had just given birth. So they're like,
it's interesting, the perspective, and how I know a lot of mothers who feel the same way. They're like, I can't watch that right now. I don't know if I'll ever come back to it, but I can't right now. Let's focus on the child. Well, I heard her talk about how she hadn't been offered anything in 2 years. And all I thought about after this film was, well, I mean, just send him this reel. Send him this movie, because she's so hunkered down in, she's the right age for the character, and they don't try to simplify that or dumb it down to the point where she doesn't really look like she's been on the road for a long period of time. She looks like and the term is war torn. That's what Jesse says to her in the dress shop. You're too war torn to wear a dress, and it's a very nice scene in how she gets her to smile and all that other stuff. It doesn't get her to, she does. So I love the fact that people look real. I mean, Kirsten Dunst is a beautiful woman, no doubt about it, and she's a movie star.
Yeah.
But she was a journalist in a civil war, and there was no doubt. And the tone in her voice, and the subtlety to the angst, and the gravitas to the I'm just coming to the end of this. Like this, I'm done. Like it's affecting me in a way, because she says to Jesse somewhere in the middle of the film, or actually kind of in the beginning of the film, where they have that scene in the car wash tunnel. And she says, this is the job. We don't ask those questions, because if we ask those questions, then we have to think about the answers for those questions. So we just don't ask. And you can see where, and Jesse even says, she's right. And that's where it begins with her. That's where the first lesson is over, and she's learned it. Now she's going to improve and move on. to keep herself alive in this situation, not just physically, but just mentally. And that's where with Lee, it starts to degrade to the point where she is silently screaming at the end of the film because she can't handle this fight that's happening.
She becomes less of a tool for society. I think that that's ultimately what I work with journalists every day, and I think that that's ultimately like there's that, and similarly with Steph and with other veterinarians, there is that, what they would call it in healthcare would be like gallows humor. My sister's a nurse too. Like there are certain things that veterinarians or human medicine people may laugh about, but they're not laughing about it because they don't care about it. They laugh about it because it's a way to cope with a lot of the emotional issues that go on with that. And then in a similar way, journalists have the same thing where it's that fight or flight thing. When something happens and everybody's running away from it, there's a certain breed of people that will go towards it. And these are those people. And specifically photojournalists, and then the Wagner Moura character Joel, the interviewer, they are the ones that for whatever reason are attracted to that thing for a reason, and they become tools of society, I think, that are necessary. And I think as the movie goes on, Kirsten Dunst's character ceases to be that tool and becomes a person in society who's really taking in not only all the things that she's seeing right now in this moment, but all of the things that she has seen over her whole career. And she just, like you said, at the end, in DC, like she can't handle it.
No, and it all starts flashing in her eyes.
Can't. Yeah.
In her mind's eye. It's interesting that you mentioned Joel, because Joel is the kind of character where I was like, I can't deal with this guy right now. I just can't deal
definitely
with
hitting on Kaylee Spaney. Like and any other girl that is around. Yeah,
that's handled a lot better than I thought they were going to handle it. That's handled.
I was hoping that it wasn't going to go any farther than it did, because it just takes away from.
When he goes to the back of the truck and he starts talking about sleep and don't expect it, I was like,
hey, I've got drugs. You want me to give you drugs that make you sleepy?
I know,
like,
right?
Oh, jeez.
Like, why are people always smoking pot and drinking in these films? Like, I would never do that. I would be like, what? Like, it would freak me out. I would be like, this is a waste of a buzz. Anyway, the world is not conducive to smoking pot, but they always are. I think that that's to represent, obviously, that the rules and regulations of society have changed, that, we're sleeping in a tent in the middle of a football stadium. So if somebody's going to light up a joint, I think we can handle that, considering our government is like, doing what they're doing. But the thing about Joel that I found interesting and I was glad about was that, he's like, let's go to the fight. And he's like, war, yes, this is crazy. Adrenaline. And I was like, can't deal with that guy. I just can't deal with him. That whole disposition and attitude is perplexing to me. And I often think, what would I be like in this situation? You can't ever tell, obviously. It's a movie, and this, and my life is my life. But I often think, where would I fall into this? Would I fall into the guy who gets addicted to the adrenaline? Would I fall into the person who becomes so tone deaf to it that they just have to block it out? What is the survival mechanism I would take on? And the fact that they turn Joel into a full three-dimensional character at the end, and that he's, he does that whole, I call it the Al Pacino silent scream on the opera step thing. And as the troops are passing by and he's going through his little moment of breakdown, it's like, okay, yeah, he is a human being. He hasn't lost his humanity. And that, I think, is important, because there is this, it's almost subliminal, almost subconscious reaction to how do human beings experience all of this and not like completely break down. They don't, because they will. And they that's just how we are set up. So you can be as strong as you want. You can be as tone deaf as you want. You can be as adrenaline junkie as you want. You can be as naive as you want. You can be as educated as the elder journalist is. You can be all of those things, but you're quintessentially human at the end, and it will affect you. So I thought that was actually an important kind of theme in the film, that we cannot and will not lose our humanity, even in the worst of times. That's, it's a little like, it's a little cheesy, but it's also an important theme, I believe. So I was glad the way that they kind of twisted it and they showed him fully being human.
Well, and there are certain there are certain scenes that give you that contrast, because the one scene that gives you the contrast between the people who, even though we look at them and say like, how could they even like keep a straight face and take pictures and engage in this way and keep their stuff together, but then we still see those cathartic moments, or not even cathartic, but just those like opposite moments where they're releasing that. You get a character that isn't even credited in the movie, played by Jesse Plemons, who is the opposite. It's a person without. There are people out there that are without humanity, and he is an opportunist. He's got a uniform on. He has access to weapons. He has access to ammunition. He has access to trucks. And what does he do with it? He rounds up people who he disagrees with and kills them all and puts them in a huge mass grave. So that was the one. You knew they leaned into it in the in the trailer. I'm kind of glad that the movie, the plot wasn't exactly how it was in the trailer, because that's the problem with trailers, is they pick and choose words and phrases, and then they put them all together however the hell they want, and it isn't a good representation of the film. But it was, that character was menacing in the trailer, also menacing in the film. But that was one of those scenes where, you get that tension that it has a good release, actually, with the Stephen McKinley Henderson character, where he comes in and kind of swoops in at the end. But the score was good, and the score kind of like came up during that time. And then also just the use of score and use of silence, I think was done really well. I guess that would be considered sound design too, but in that particular scene, that they draw it out to the point where you're just like, you just want it to end. You just don't know how it's going to end. You just want it to end. And that's effective filmmaking. And I thought that was another example of why, Alex Garland not only is a good writer, but he knows the right buttons to push to get people to squirm, essentially.
And his timing with his needle drops are weird. Like, there's all of a sudden,
it.
I do too, but it is.
I like
just
the music choice too.
Yeah, but the where it drops and the way it's on Joel's face, and I can't even remember specifically what's the scene where the kind of almost hip hop dance song drops.
Yeah, it's De La Soul.
Right.
Yeah.
What scene is that again?
After the firefight at the high rises.
That's
when
really
it's all silent.
odd place to drop that needle. That's a really off-putting place, because
you saw him joking around with the guys after the fight, right? You saw
during
Joel
that whole sequence in the song, you see as you see shots of what people are doing at this point. You see her checking her camera, Jesse checking her camera
slow-mo
for the shot that she got, which comes up later on. It's not a criticism. It's just an observation of how strange I felt during that. Like, if it had been 5 seconds before or 10 seconds later, if it was just a silent shot of him, but it's just a split second and then it drops, and it's like, wait, I'm not ready for a hip hop montage now. Hold on, slow down. What's happening here? But in a way, that kind of makes sense.
But that's, speaking of cathartic, it was cathartic. So they were a part of the winning team, quote unquote, in this situation, because they were able to clear the high rises and they got the prisoners out. And so like this whole time, Joel's joking around with those guys, and he doesn't realize what these guys are going to do, that they've got like a 50 cal, machine gun, that they're literally mowing down prisoners, which is not cool.
Right. And actually, the scene when they go up into the building and shoot the guy point blank is exactly what Jesse Plemons does in the scene later on.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, like, they're enemy combatants. They're both, in uniforms. They're both part of groups that are established. Whereas what Jesse Plemons is doing is literally walking down the street and shooting people. In fact, they talked about that. They're like, do any of those people have uniforms on? And they're like, nope.
Yeah, and I get that,
but you're right. There is a protocol.
Makes me feel weird.
The
that
Geneva Convention. There is a protocol for prisoners. Yes,
which
totally.
I guess is a point. See, it's really well done. Oh my gosh, I have some little things that we'll talk about later on, but it's really well done. Let me say this really quick.
Yeah,
Alex Garland is smart enough to know that the audience will pick up on those nuances that will question how you would feel in that situation. It all goes back to how I was feeling. What would I do? Where would I be? Would I want to take this guy as a prisoner of war? Maybe there is no such thing as the prisoner of war in this civil war situation. Maybe that doesn't exist. And the fact that it doesn't exist, at least seemingly so, is unnerving on so many different levels. So anyway, I interrupted you.
Well, for me, I think the reason why the thing that I got out of that was that, like, this is a celebratory moment. Joel's joking around with the guys. Everything's cool. They won. All right. And then it immediately snaps you out of it by saying, like, these guys who are as inhumane as the Jesse Plemons character to a certain extent, because they have prisoners and they have the ability to take those prisoners to whatever prisoner area that they have cordoned off for them. But instead they're so just jazzed and like that they won and they're like, we're just gonna get rid of these guys, and they took them out there and they just mowed them down, like unceremoniously or in an inhumane way. And so right there is. It jars you out of the, like, oh, we're part of the good guys type of a thing. It's kind of like, wait a second, just because you're on this side for this particular instance doesn't mean that, like, these guys are incapable of being wrong, or that they're that they everything they do is right. So I thought that was a good
sign. Sorry to interrupt you again. There's a big sign on the building, spray painted F the WF.
Well, that was in New York, though, so that's different. Yeah,
right.
They were.
But that's still, like, it's showing you there are a bunch of different sides to this discussion, whether or not.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, and that was the hard part that I didn't understand. Like, at the very beginning, the girl with the bomb and an American flag, she may have been part of the Western forces. I don't know.
Yeah, it is a little, in a way, it needs just a tad bit more explanation in certain places, a tad bit more of a clue of what we're seeing and why we're seeing it. And Alex Garland, once again, is smart, and he thinks that we're smart and we're going to pick up on certain things. And there's just so much going on that I kept thinking to myself, don't get bogged down in the details, because I kept going, okay, California and Texas succeeded, but what
purposeful.
Was Florida doing? Yeah, absolutely, it's purposeful. But because really there is no answer to why men create war. It's part of your nature. I don't know. Arnold said it best. I don't know, but my mind was trying to figure out, and then I realized if I figure it out, then I'm going to put a justification for one side or to the other. I'm going to pick a side. And I don't think that's the point.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the point of this film.
Yeah.
That's not what I took from it. So anyway.
No, and I think I did listen to an interview with Alex Garland. He did talk about that, because somebody was like, why Texas and California? And he said that, his quote was, their opinion in this world is that we are more concerned about a fascist constitution smashing president than we are about our differences. So that was it. Because, you're right. They do lay out that he's in his third term, which means that he's essentially figured out a way to get rid of the 22nd Amendment and the 25th Amendment, which, is about presidential succession. He abolishes the FBI. He hasn't talked to the press in 14 months. It's those types of things that he's using the military for acts of force on his own citizens, on American citizens. So all of those things put together, that's what they're concerned about. So that was enough to get people in California and people in Texas who would disagree about a bunch of things in general to band together to try to depose this dictator, essentially.
Well, in very simplest terms, when I realized it was California and Texas, I was like, that president must have done something bad. Like, if they're agreeing on stuff.
Exactly.
And Florida's in on it now, too.
Oh, man.
I was like, something is not good here.
Yeah.
And you see the flag with the 2 stars on it, which I thought was... See, I don't know where you want to go, but I do want to say this. Have we ever talked about my theory of opposites? I think we've touched base on it a couple of times. So you go to a concert or you go to a play or you go to a movie or whatever, and you're expecting a certain song to, like, just soar, and you're expecting it just to be the best song of the show. And it's good. And it's like, oh, I'm glad I saw that song live. And then a song you're never even considering becomes the star of the show. It shines. Or you go to a play and you're expecting the scenery to be great because the scenic designer is great, but yet the sound is pulling you away from everything and making you believe what's going on stage. Same with actors, same with poetry. It's always a line in a poem. The most famous lines in poetry aren't necessarily the greatest lines in that poem. So it's the opposite. So when I went to this film, I thought the hard part of this film is to convince me that there's a civil war going on in America. The dystopian, the mid-apocalyptic event, the war-torn cities. I thought that's going to be difficult because that's always hard because they always overdo it or they don't do it enough or whatever. And I thought, it's going to be the human story that pulls this movie together. It's going to be the performances that pull this movie together. And that's not necessarily untrue, but the way that he handles a warehouse burning as they're traveling down the road, or some of the typical war tropes that you see, the way that he handles that, and the way that he handles, and what's the deal with the neon colors? The neon colors splat. What are they, paintball? What were they doing? It's like,
have you ever heard of the Color Run?
Yeah, absolutely. And also there's the festival in India.
That's probably
what's it called? The Hate? It's called something like that. Gosh.
Well, either way, I'll look it up. But the Color Run, I'm sure, is based on that. It's kind of an identifier, I think, for the Western forces or for the people who are opposing the United States government to identify themselves as,
Holy.
We are.
Sorry.
No, what is it?
Festival Holy. And it's a Hindu festival, and they just go crazy and start throwing powdered dye all over the place, colors, and you end up in this multi-colored mud.
That's
it's
cool.
Just beautiful. And actually, it's strange little coincidence. The spring baking championship, I like all those competition baking shows, and they did one based on the Festival of Holi, so they had to make it as vibrant and as colorful and all that other stuff. And it's very interesting how human people perceive things and how they interpret things, because you had one person who's like blue and purple and all these colors all over their cake, and one person with one yellow, one blue, and you're like, wait, what's that? This is a stripped down version of this. And they're like, yeah, no, we need color. Anyway, the point is that I thought about that because you see those colored kind of paint splatters on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And
when
she's sitting,
when Jesse's sitting down looking at her photos.
And then in their hair, when the sniper's trying to take out
the sniper scene.
Yeah. Ooh, very well done. And why always Christmas? Don't be twisting Christmas, Alex. I need to talk to you about that. Why? That was so creepy. I was like, no, not Santa.
Yeah, because it's like June.
It's terrible. And he's right in the middle of the road, and there's the sleigh, and like the arch is over. It's like all set up as this ominous warning, but it's Christmas. And then they do that twisted thing with the music, and Christmas music is playing. It's like, no.
Yeah.
I went to my happy place. I wasn't gonna.
Even those snipers, you said they had like multicolored hair, and then the fingernails on the sniper himself were painted those kind of pastel colors. So I think that was an identifier that and that's where the Joel character is kind of like, wait a second, so who are you fighting for, and like who are you shooting against, and
we're trying not to get shot.
Yes,
and the one got shot up. Well, what's amazing to me about the colors is that it's so identifiable without any description.
Yeah.
You on some kind of subconscious level know these are the Western forces, or no, this is the military. Maybe these are rogue military people like the Jesse Plemons character later on. By the way, talk about the cameo of the year. I mean, my goodness gracious, what?
The fact that it's uncredited, it's like Jesse Plemons is like, you don't need me to put my name in the credits. Everybody knows me.
When he goes, well, which kind? You're like, wait, what? That
and who
was
chose
such a natural choice, and I think it just happened. And apparently, Kirsten Dunst, who's in the scene too, was standing behind the camera going, "My baby is an actor. That man can act. Look at what my baby's doing. Like, that guy is good." And apparently, he wasn't cast in that role. It was somebody else's part, and the actor had to drop out.
She's like, "I know a guy."
Yeah. And they're like, and I think Alex Garland didn't want Jesse Plemons. And somehow, I don't remember, I don't know how the breakdown goes, but somebody didn't want him, okay? I don't know if he auditioned for it originally or what, but I'm like, I'm here with my wife, you know?
That was a good choice.
Hey, remember me?
Also, who chose the red sunglasses? Because
that is so crazy, because it's going to be one of those things that's going to be the topic of discussion for decades to come. What possessed that character? Let's just start there to put those on. And I think it comes down to we're at a point where anything goes. Like, I have seen and done things, and the world has seen and done things, and America has seen and done things that we were never expecting. So I'm not, as a military person, supposed to be putting on stuff like this, but because of everything around us, this is minimal compared to what actually has been going on. I mean, some people could interpret them as rose-colored glasses. Some people could interpret them as red for the devil, whatever. There's a bunch of different interpretations. The fact that it's undefined is the most disturbing part about it. It's so disturbing. I don't even know why. I think
the rose-colored glasses take is interesting, because you could say, like, most of the people say, like, rose-colored glasses is a person thinking of something in a positive light, but ultimately it's, you know, him, that character, thinking of things exactly the way they should be. You know, I am the judge, jury, and executioner of all of the people who are getting rid of all of the un-American people in this place, so that all we'll have left is Americans, and we'll be fine. So that's and he now has the power to do that, because he's got the gun and he's got the other soldiers to follow him. So, like, that is the rose-colored glasses take, I think, but still,
from his point of view, it is a rose-colored glasses, like you were saying, because now I get to do what I've always thought was the right thing to do. And the way that it's handled, it's not exactly a subtle scene, and I have some trouble with some of it, and we'll talk about that in just a few seconds. I have questions, let's put it that way. But think about all of those people who are going to be watching that film, and because it's not hitting you over the head with this political arm or this political fist and saying, this is bad, this is what you should not be doing, you people are heading towards this, whatever it may be that would make it heavy-handed, he just subtly throws in these things that when you're watching it as an audience member, you think to yourself, am I like that? Would I think like that? Would I go there? How are my extremist views, how would they get twisted if all was open to me and a machine gun? Like, what would I be doing? And I think it will help a lot of people define who they are, good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, do I think people are going to come to this and change their views? No, I don't. But I also believe that maybe you can look at Uncle John over there and go, okay, well, you know, if anything goes down, me and the kids are going that way. John's going that way, and we'll say goodbye. Good luck with your purple, red glasses, whatever you choose to do. I would wear all yellow because I like that. But yeah, it's disturbing on so many different levels. But we went from holy pastel back to his red glasses, which makes sense. So I think that the reason why this film has become divisive when it comes to the audience and critics, because it's not doing well per se.
I mean, it's made $90 million.
Yeah, it made some money. No doubt. But and the critics have gone back and forth, and some are great and some are not great. And that's fine. I've read most of them, and I agree with a lot of things that people are saying, good, bad, or indifferent. But my question is this. You have this great idea. To execute it is almost impossible, because it's a possible situation. It's one might say in this world now, a probable situation. I'm not making a statement. I'm saying that some people might think that, okay? So you have this whole idea and you base it around these journalists. But is there something called movie conceits? Is that a word? Meaning that the movie has to do something in order for the movie to progress this way. There has to be an action that puts it all together. And I'll start with the first one that I was like, in the very beginning of the film, you spend a good 10 minutes talking to these two journalists who are trying to convince each other that bringing in this elderly journalist on the roads with them is a good idea. And both of them are kind of like, I don't know, you're too slow, you're elderly, we don't want to be responsible. And he's like, don't make me beg for a ride, and so forth. So you have this long conversation between two characters about how another character is not fit to go along. And then all of a sudden it shoots to the next day and there's this young person in the car. And you're like, wait, how did that happen? Like, I know she has to go with them. That's the movie conceit, which I think is a term, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Is it?
Yeah. It's conceit. Okay. Yeah. It's the old and the new. Yeah.
So why? Yes, exactly. Because they're going to parallel each other's story. But why exactly is it so easy for her to all of a sudden go along? And now there's a conversation. She's like, can I talk to you? And blah, 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 blah. But it seems to be just like, okay, the problems we had with an elderly person, we needed to discuss. But a problem we have with a completely naive stranger, we're going to be like, okay, so maybe that's handled later on in the conversation. He was flirting with her. He was drunk, all that other stuff when you find out. Another movie conceit that I have a problem with that happens later on. Not problem, just, well, that was awfully convenient. Okay, now we have this young journalist in the car. And I get why she needs to be there. But why did it have to be so easy and almost a throwaway that she gets to come along? Am I explaining this right? Make sense to it? It jarred me out of it for a split second. That I was like, wait a second. These people who've been journalists in all of these war zones are all of a sudden she's more of a hindrance than the elderly gentleman is, because the elderly gentleman is experienced in this and actually helps him out a couple of times.
Big time.
Another movie conceit that I have a tad bit of that was easy and convenient. All of this stuff is happening, and that's how, okay, we'll get there.
There's no way out of the Jesse Plemons situation.
That's my point.
There is no way out.
But that's my point.
Yeah.
My point is, how come some of the threads are going around and around and around, and he just easily goes, oh, this. Yeah. When it doesn't make sense for the momentum that he has going on for such a for a period of time. Yeah. The momentum of the scene before is, we shouldn't, this guy's elderly, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, there she is, the biggest hindrance you could possibly have. She doesn't have any of the equipment. She doesn't have how she gets the helmet later on. Who knows?
Yeah,
I mean, that's all easy to be explained and not that big of a deal. My issue is not that it happened. My issue is how it happened. We're just expected to believe it. Why couldn't there be a bombing at the hotel, and in the shuffle, she gets into the car and they're like, get in. And then they drive away.
I think that we're primed for a couple reasons, because the Joel character doesn't really interact with her at all. We don't ever see him interact with her, period, until she's in the truck. So we don't see their interactions, number one. Number two, we're primed for the Kirsten Dunst character, Lee, to have an affinity towards Jesse because she helps her in a situation. She sees her get hit with the bat or whatever, or with a baton or something, and then kind of brings her back, gives her the vest, and then, you know, becomes like a caretaker for her there. And then later on at the hotel, you know, she's kind of like, you know, they talk back and forth. They have, you know, similar interests, obviously. And then she also kind of sees her as, you know, a potential, I don't think she sees her as a protege. I think she sees her as a naive person.
Yeah. And she doesn't want another person to die.
But she is able over the, I think she's able to just be like, you know what? I don't have time to deal with this right now. But then ultimately, as the film goes on, you know, you're right. Without that character, the film doesn't work. Like, no, without
that, she's us.
Yeah, but she's us. But then also, I think for the Lee character, Jesse is her natural successor, because she feels like she can't give up. Like at the beginning of the film, she can't stop doing what she's doing because nobody else is going to do it. Nobody else is going to pick up a camera and be in these places and be able to document what's going on for future generations. But by the end of the movie, she's completely fine with the fact that Jesse is now there, and she's happy, I think, to a certain extent. She's content that if she did go away, however she goes away, that somebody else would be there to take that picture.
And all of that is understandable and layered and interesting and character development in the best possible way. But all of a sudden she's in the car. She's just there. It's just, if for a split second I found myself going, I'm not a screenwriter and I wouldn't even know where to begin, but I'm sitting here coming up with 1,000 different ways that she could have gotten into that car that wasn't so simple. The stakes are so high in this movie that when you do something like that, it levels it out to the point where I'm focused on that now versus what the next couple of things happen. Now, granted, the next couple of things are her driving down the road with the breeze in her hair and all that other stuff, traveling movie montage things. And then you see the, apocalyptic world and that gas station and stuff like that, which is shot so well because I did not see the bodies hanging when we first drove by. And I was like, what's so fascinating about this car wash? She's going to take a shower? Like, I don't get it. And then I didn't realize the stakes were as high as they were. I do like the way that Kirsten Dunst's character handles that scene, though. She's very quick on her feet. Her pulse never rises. She's just like, I want to take your picture with them. And that diffuses that gives that guy what he wants.
Appeal to the ego of the crazy person.
With the gun and who have two people hanging who are still alive, by the way.
Yeah.
So anyway, the second one is the car chase scene, if you will. When they're going down the road and all of a sudden, and Jesse's asleep and Lee sees a car in the back coming up on them very quickly. And they're talking about this, and all of a sudden they find out it's their friend. And because the one guy's talking about, they're such simple names, and I can't keep them in my mind. I don't know why. Joel was so drunk the night before that he gave out what they were doing, even though it's this big kind of secret thing that they make sure they don't tell anybody. So it's in contradiction, or it's contradictive to what they were saying earlier. So all Joel needs to do is have a couple shots of tequila, and he says everything, and then gets this young girl to come along with him, and all things are messed up because Joel was drunk. Okay, it happens. It's like the scene in The Beach. That's what happens with the map. That's how the one guy gets the map, because
Alex Garland.
Yeah.
Wrote it.
Okay. Which I love that movie, by the way. A lot of people hate it, but I love it. And I like the video game thing. I've said it. I'm tired of everybody bringing up that scene. Oh, that brings me out of the film. No, it's important. Shut up. I mean, be quiet. It's important. Anyway, so then she does something a young person would do. I want to do it, and crawls across into the car. Why is it always in these apocalyptic movies that people do the stupidest things that do not keep them safe? They always do stupid things.
Yeah.
Always. I'm rewatching The Last of Us, and the young lady in that, Ellie, she does a couple of really, Ellie.
Yeah.
You're in a monster eating world. What are you thinking about? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And, but she's young, and all bets are off because the world she lives in is turned upside down. Same with this one. Okay. So you believe that she would do something as stupid as that by crawling over into the car, and then that causes the Jesse Plemons scene to happen. Okay. Yeah. So I have a little bit of a problem at how easy that was to connect her to get into that car and get separated from them and all that other stuff. You didn't really need it. Not technically. They could have just been going down the road. They didn't need to. I get it. They're in such a stressful situation that they do crazy things, because like when people cut on themselves and people do stuff to hurt themselves that actually makes the pain go away for a split second. I get why it's there. Then the third and final movie conceit that just made me go was the actual killing of Jesse Plemons' character. Like the distance from where the car was to where the car had to travel.
He should have heard the truck coming at him. Yeah.
And there's another guy with a gun. How come it's all these guys with the guns always hesitate to fire in a movie? Yeah. There's a couple of Batman scenes in a couple of films, which I'm not going to mention which ones, that have been broken down by stunt coordinators. And they're like, look at this guy right here.
He's not even doing it, just standing there.
Could have shot him in the face 4 times.
Yeah, well, John Wick's the same way. I mean, it's if you start analyzing, or the other one was Last Jedi, where like the scene in the big throne room in The Last Jedi, where there's just like, there's Praetorian guards just like flailing around doing nothing.
Yeah.
And then like, now it's my time to battle against Kylo Ren. Okay, now I'm gonna engage.
Right. And I understand sometimes you just have to accept it for what it is. But when you're talking about a film that is as intricately laid out as Civil War is, then there are small things that add up to pulling me out of the film and making me question, okay, that was an awfully simple fix to an unfixable situation. And I'm not sure how you would fix it. And I've already been brave enough to give my opinion about how it would fix other things in Alex Garland's films, or this film. And listen, if I didn't like this guy as a director, I would feel very shy about saying this is a minuscule problem for me, because he's so high on my list of people I admire as filmmakers. I mean, he's done 4 very, very interesting films. And there's no doubt that, you can't have a conversation without saying these are some of the most unique films so far put on the big screen. So I am respectfully complimenting him. At the same time, I'm questioning why such simple things seem to resolve such complex problems. Anyway, I just had to bring it up because it just was one of those things where it's like,
yeah, the one that, and we do need to talk about the end, and I'll bring this up as a segue in there, is that the one that kind of people have brought up is the fact that Kirsten Dunst's character is wearing a flak jacket, and she immediately dies when she's shot at the end, as opposed to, and there's no blood. You don't even see any blood. Like, so she doesn't get shot in the head. She maybe gets shot like in the leg and bleeds out quickly. I don't know, but or maybe I'm just thinking about this. Maybe the guns that are used are using armor piercing rounds or something, or
doesn't she spin though and get shot in the stomach?
No, she's looking at Kaylee Spaney when she gets shot, because she takes those like 4 different shots of her as she dies,
which is one of the greatest payoffs in movie history.
Yeah,
it's a great payoff.
It's so, and you're right. The first time I saw it, I kind of, especially when seeing how cavalier the Jesse character was getting in the DC leading up to getting into the White House, that all looked to me like, oh man, like she's getting out there and sticking her neck out like really a lot. So I could see, and I just did see this the second time, is there was a scene right before Kirsten Dunst gets shot, her character gets shot. There was a scene where she crosses across the hallway and takes some shots as she crosses, and that's what the Jesse character is like, ooh, I want to do that. I want to get that shot. And that's what gets her in trouble. So,
which is a great movie conceit.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. How that's connected makes sense. So what else about the ending did you want to talk about? Just
in general, the fact that there's she has a meltdown. The Lee character has a meltdown. Essentially, and she isn't taking any pictures. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. Is that like she ceases to take pictures after the high rise thing? She doesn't take any pictures during the sniper scene. That's a huge scene. She takes 0 pictures. She looks at little purple flowers on the ground and falls asleep while Kaylee Spaney's over there taking pictures of the sniper and all that stuff. She doesn't take any pictures in the stadium when they sleep overnight. And the first time that she, re-engages is after she gets through her. Well, it's ultimately when the fake president motorcade comes out. And then she's, everybody's looking one way and she's looking the other way because she's been in situations enough to be like, okay, maybe she's seen something like this before, I guess. But that's when she engages, and then she starts taking pictures after that in the White House.
Maybe it's like my theory about the stages of death, where, you're angry. And she's kind of angry in the beginning of the film. She's kind of like disgruntled and get away from, get off my lawn. And then eventually it's acceptance, where you just, I don't know if she's accepting her death, because at any point do people think I'm going to die now? Maybe, but I don't think that's present in the narrative of the film. So maybe it's sort of like one of those things where, and it's really obvious because, when she falls down and dies, Jesse's character rises, so obviously, it's a visual metaphor for one, out goes the old, in comes the new.
Yeah.
And the passion has been transposed or explored and allowed to become a passion, because obviously you have to have some form of a passion to get yourself in that kind of situation.
But it does make you wonder if she didn't think that Jesse was a good enough photographer and a worthy enough successor, for lack of a better word, to Lee, would she have saved her? But she saved her because she cares about her, number one. And number two, it seems like because she knows that Jesse will get the shot of the president, if in fact there is a shot of the president.
Yeah.
And,
well, they make that clear when they're developing the film.
Yeah.
And she says 1 out of 30, and it's the third or fourth picture she looks at, which is the picture that she's like, that's a really good shot. That's a really good thing. So I do have to say this. When they come into the press secretary's or the press room, and the press secretary's there, and she's like, I'm here on the blah, 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 blah. In my head, I thought, shoot her. And I went, oh my gosh. After 2 hours in this movie, I'm Jesse.
Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah, you are. Get to the president. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
And they did. And
they
that's when it jarred me. That's when I went, what did I just think? Like, if they had taken her down as a prisoner or handcuffed her, it would have never dawned on me that thought went through. I was like, shoot her. Like, get rid of her.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh.
Whoa. Yeah.
What will happen in the real world? Who knows? Anyway, so Nick Offerman, president. Speaking of The Last of Us, I just rewatched that episode that he won the Emmy for. It's probably one of the best hours of TV ever. That said, I'm so glad they didn't overuse him. I'm so glad they used him the way that they did, because there is a moment when you see him on screen that you're like, okay, say something funny. You're just expecting him to do something funny
or like whittle some wood or something.
Yeah, or just do whatever he does, and he doesn't, and it's handled extremely well. And then I love the quote, I love the shot, and the end shot during the credits is very disturbing, because it's very similar to the shot of Osama bin Laden that was released. It's very much, and it's, yes, bad people doing bad things, not to minimize it and not to make any kind of long statement at the end, but there is an effect in my emotional state where I go, oh, yay, another person's dead. Let's celebrate. That's not a good thing. Like, regardless of that person being a bad person, to celebrate it bothers me. And so when the shot started to develop in front of your eyes when you're watching the film, I was like, okay, I'm good. I don't care if there's anything after the credits. I'm good. I know what's developing in front of me right now, and I'm, and I knew they were going to be smiling, and I knew they'd be like, look, we got him. And I was like, I'm out. I have had my fill, Alex Garland. I get it. I'm moving on. I can't do it. And so in a way, it's a very affecting shot.
Yeah. And the song that's paired with it is a band I've never heard of called Suicide. And the song's called Dream Baby Dream. And they used that band a couple of other places. They're very synth heavy, and it's very lo-fi synth. And I think that is the kind of like feel of this movie. It's just a driving, droning, just stripped down. That's the feeling of this movie. And you're just like barreling forward throughout the movie. And it is, you could call it a road trip movie or whatever you want to call it, if you're wanting to try to like isolate it down into, like you said, those tropes or those conceits, which that's ultimately what it is. But it's also, we also see the characters grow, which is the best kind of, road trip movies. So, but yeah. All right. Well, anything else?
Lots of stuff, but we're good.
Civil War, the feel-good road trip movie of 2024. All right,
discover who you are on the road trip.
Oh, jeez. You can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast, and we'll see you next time.